Madam President, democracy, our system, is an anomaly in world history. The norm are pharaohs, kings, dictators, emperors, presidents for life. That's the norm. The vast sweep of human history is all about authoritarians running their society. The idea that the people can actually participate in the building and operating and electing and creating their government is an unusual one. It's an anomaly in world history. That should tell us something, because that means it's fragile. And we have seen how fragile it can be. On January 6th, our entire democracy came down to the integrity and courage of one man, Mike Pence. If Vice President Pence had succumbed to the pressure, enormous pressure that he was under to try to throw out certain electoral votes and choose and count others, we would have been in literally uncharted constitutional territory. There is no telling how that chaotic situation would have been resolved. Our system is unusual and it's fragile. Likewise, the Secretary of State of Georgia, a Republican, a strong Republican who voted for President Trump, what if he hadn't done the right thing? What if he had responded to President Trump on that infamous phone call saying, I'll see what I can do to jigger the numbers and find those 11,770 votes? Where would we be? The point is, we should not put ourselves in situations that depend expressly upon the luck and good fortune of having the right people in the right place at the right time. Our institutions should be solid and viable and work regardless of who is at the levers of power. The Electoral College and the Electoral Count Act is a time bomb under the edifice of democracy. I rarely disagree with Alexander Hamilton, but if you read the 68th Federalist, where he justifies the Electoral College, he just gets it wrong. Actually, he doesn't so much get it wrong. History proved him wrong, because the Electoral College never worked in the way he described it. We have to realize that the framers were a little bit suspicious of democracy. The only institution in our government in 1787 that was popularly elected was the House of Representatives. Senators were elected by state legislatures until the 20th century. Presidents were elected by the Electoral College, and of course Supreme Court and court judges were appointed by the President, confirmed by the Senate. Only popular election for the House of Representatives. Now, Hamilton's concept for the Electoral College was that it would be a sort of council of elders. In fact, when you read the 68th Federalist, he doesn't even think about the electors being pledged to a particular candidate. He basically says the people of each state will elect wise people to come together to select the best qualified person for president. He used an amazing phrase in light of what happened on January 6th. He said, the system we've proposed is not perfect, it's at least excellent. But then he goes on to say, it was also particularly desirable to afford as little opportunity as possible to tumult and disorder. Well, that's the definition of what happened here on January 6th, was tumult and disorder that was created by this edifice that's never worked. I, for one, think we should abolish the Electoral College. The people of the United States should elect their president, and the votes of each citizen of each state should count equally. Instead of getting into this game situation where you go to particular states, you ignore other states, some states you know where the votes are going to go, I think the people of America should choose their president. That's what we all think we're doing on Election Day, and yet, as we learned on January 6th, we've created this structure, which never worked as Hamilton and as the framers envisioned it, that has turned into a kind of Russian roulette with our democracy. So, in the 1876 election, it almost broke down. It was so close nobody could decide who won. They ended up with a commission to decide the election, which turned out to be a dark chapter in American history, because that commission ended up resolving the presidency between Hayes and Tilden on essentially a corrupt deal. The deal was Hayes could become president if he agreed to end Reconstruction in the South. And of course, that led to 70, 80 years of Jim Crow. Not a happy experience in our history. After that experience, the Electoral Count Act was passed, well-intentioned to try to solve some of the problems that were manifested in the Hayes-Tilden election of 1876, but the problem is it's a terribly drafted law. Scholars, politicians, lawyers all concede it was confusing, ambiguous, and again, led to the problems of January 6. I should also mention that presidents who won the popular vote almost universally in our system also won the Electoral College. Recently, that hasn't been the case. Twice in this short century, we've had presidents elected by the Electoral College who lost the popular vote by millions of votes. So is that reflection of what we all think our democracy is all about? I don't think so. The bill that we have before us now is, I believe, one of the most important pieces of legislation in this Congress, because it deals with the structure of democracy itself. All of our policy issues, whether it's the Defense Department, Ukraine, all of the policy issues, healthcare, all of those things are critically important, but the infrastructure that underlies the system is even more important. We can't do good policy if we don't have a solid underpinning of a structure of our democracy. And that's why the bill that is now part of the budget bill, the omnibus bill, is so important. The bill is bipartisan. I think that's critically important. I sat in the Rules Committee. It passed 14-1, supported by Leader McConnell, supported by Leader Schumer, 14-1. I rarely see votes like that in that committee, but because there was universal realization that we needed to do something about this. We had a hearing on it, and I remember Senator Blunt speaking at the end of that hearing and saying, this is something we need to take care of before the end of this Congress. And that was a very important announcement, and it led us to this moment. We had hearings. We brought in experts from across the country, election experts, legal experts. We made changes to the bill. The bill came to us as a result of bipartisan negotiation, led by my colleague Senator Collins from Maine and Senator Manchin of West Virginia, and a group of senators who came together organically to create this bipartisan piece of legislation. What does it do? It's really pretty straightforward. Clarifies the role of the vice president. The role of the vice president is what we call ministerial. That is just simple. Count the votes, pick them out, not policy. We clarified now, forever, and always that the vice president does not have a substantive role in deciding which votes should count. It raises the objection threshold from 1 to 20%. Right now, under the Electoral Count Act, one senator and one representative can object to the votes of any state, and then we have to go through a process in either house, which can go on for a lengthy period of time, but it's only one person. What we do in this bill is it has to be 20% of the House or 20% of the Senate. That way you're sure that the objections have some substance, some merit, and aren't just the fantasy of one or two people. So that's one of the pieces of this bill, raises the objection threshold. It ensures a single, accurate slate of electors to be clear of what the rules are in each state. It expedites judicial review, and that's important because right now it's unclear how disputes are resolved. What if a governor, for example, refuses to certify an election in their state? This law gives a path to the judiciary, expedited consideration to the Supreme Court to decide these disputes so that we don't have a lengthy period of uncertainty in how our democracy is supposed to work. It also prevents mischief like moving and canceling an election for anything but the most extreme problems. I think this is the most important bill that this Congress will consider. There's a lot more to be done. It doesn't solve every problem involving our election, as our other speakers have noted. There's a lot to be done about the casting and counting of votes. There's a lot to be done about campaign finance. But this is an important building block that we need to attend to. I want to end by thanking Senator Manchin, Senator Collins, who formed the group that brought the bill forward, to thank my colleagues Amy Klobuchar and Dick Durbin, who I worked with early on to develop a first draft of this legislation. I want to thank Senator Klobuchar and Senator Blunt for their leadership on the Rules Committee, and Senator Schumer and McConnell for working together to form a bipartisan consensus that this is an important piece of protecting the fundamental structure of our democracy. Mr. President, as I said, what we have in this country is unusual. It's an anomaly in world history. It's fragile, and we have to at all times be vigilant and diligent in protecting it and maintaining it, in filling in those cracks in the Union to make it more perfect. Ronald Reagan made a wonderful observation about the every 4 years inauguration of a president. He said, it is a commonplace occurrence, and it's a profound occurrence. It's profound because it's commonplace. The peaceful transfer of power is what distinguishes our system from almost all others in the world. We have to be sure that that continues to be the North Star of our democracy. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.